Oh, you
Well,
didn't say anything about that, Cam.
well, welcome everybody to this evening's webinar with Ann Davis from US Tennis. We're thrilled to have you with us to chat about the evolution of tennis and the role of the coach. Um, Before we get underway, we've had a bunch of really great webinars, and next week we have Alex Auerbach from the Toronto Raptors. He's their mental performance coach, talking about his transition to the role of a sports psychologist in the NBA, and talking about what that is like right now, and what they've been dealing with the pandemic. So last week we had the wonderful Anna Swisher present to everybody, and she did a fabulous job talking about coaching education as it relates to USA weightlifting. Andy Bradshaw from UK Coaching did a super job of telling us a little bit about what's happening over in the UK, and you are number 30, number 30. We go all the way back to the beginning of April. So thrilled that that you are the one to own that milestone. And we're going to chat about the evolution of the sport of tennis in the US, chat a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing, and where the big question, where are we headed? The $1,000,000 question that I don't think anybody really knows right now. But Anne, welcome. Thrilled that you're here, and how are things going?
Good. It's challenging for everybody, for all the sports, and we've been finding our way through this, and I think one of the things that I love is the fact that it's challenging individuals to be creative. That I find sometimes people, they just turn their brains off, that how do I do that? I don't know how to do it. And it's those who say, okay, got this, we've got these challenges, how do we change it and make it safe, and really do the best for our athletes.
From a sort of pre-COVID perspective, take us through sort of where things were before we had this unbelievable shutdown and this transformation of not just the way we do sport, but essentially everything we do. We've had to change our way of thinking. Paint us a little bit of a picture of sort of where things were at back in March.
Well, we've been going through some major transformation with our what we call USTAU, and that unlike other national governing bodies, tennis has never been in the accreditation or accreditation job. And we made a change of that, and we started to accredit organizations, and we have two major organizations that certify tennis professionals. So we were in the middle of that, rolling out workshops, rolling out education. Of course, all the workshops are in person, getting coach developers in place. And just as we had piloted our first phase of the workshops, it's like, ooh, not so much. We're shut down. So it's actually given us some time to breathe and really make sure that what we've got both online and what we hope that we'll be delivering in 2021 will be top notch. And we were talking earlier, making the transformation, taking a 14-hour, a 2-day in-person workshop and turn it into a virtual workshop that we'll be rolling out next month.
Yeah, so that migration online was something that you were definitely thinking about before all this. How does that connect with the general membership? Is that something that you feel like for the majority that is something that people are open to, or is we've had this conversation in a number of different sports, and our friends in swimming will say, I don't care how great of a communicator you are. If you've never jumped in the water, you're not going to be able to communicate that online. How does that relate for you guys, just from a coaching perspective, but also from a coach education standpoint?
As far as the online, we'll see. I don't think anybody's going to argue that a virtual training is going to be better than the in-person, especially when you're dealing with skills and activities. So we're going to be creative. We're going to ask people to actually demo some activities so we can get the feel for that. We're going to have a lot of discussion about videos. We needed to do it. And I think the reality is, even when we get back to face-to-face workshops, there are going to be some people that may not be able to get to a workshop. And I think especially at this beginning phase, this initial phase of certification, this will be okay. At some point, there's going to have to be some in-person work. This is called our Tennis Essentials 1. We have a Tennis Essentials 2 and a 3 that will roll out in 2021. Those would be really hard for those to go online. But what we've learned is never say never with what we've had to deal with and achieve during this time.
Yeah, it brings me back to a conversation we had back in October at the Global Symposium back in Japan, and I know the International Tennis Union has done a really fabulous job with a lot of online resources, and I think that's arguably one of the great models of different sports around the world. That the International Federation has really done an extraordinary job. How does that help or hinder you guys in terms of what you're trying to adapt to the US market?
Well, I think the nice thing is that there's so much sharing, and we're going from having no LMS system to house our virtual work to developing one, getting it ready, integrating it with 2 organizations who have their own learn management systems. So it's a lot of creating, but also a lot of sharing, which I think is good. And you can always learn lessons, not only from what the ITF has done, but what so many of the people who are on this call with other national governing bodies. It's been really nice. I guess because of the amount of time we have, the amount of time that's been spent sharing information. I see Anna in the meeting, and I hear her name about every other day on what she's doing and what can we take from their learnings and incorporate it into what we're doing.
I think it's a good contrast, because I know that we were all split as this thing started to occur. Of do we pivot really quickly and create something and just figure it out along the way, or do we take time to really think this through? And I definitely think that it was far more challenging to stop and wait. I think that for many of us, the reaction was, let's just do something. It doesn't matter what we do, let's just do it. So can you sort of walk us through just a general perspective of that conversation of how you guys navigated that?
We kind of are learning as we go along. Again, there were certain pockets of the country that you could do a workshop, some you couldn't do a workshop. As a national governing body, we set protocol, we set processes, we set not rules, but guidelines on this is how you should do things for the sport, just for the general tennis playing population. So if we're setting those, making those recommendations, we have really got to follow them, because everybody's looking at us to see what we're going to do. So it became really evident that we couldn't just wait this out and hope that in another month or 2 we could start our in-person workshops, that we had to get moving on a virtual version, and then just steamroll forward, use this time to make sure that when we're back live, as I mentioned before, the TE2 and TE3 are ready to go, and all these folks who have started in the pathway have a place to go.
And then what was the sense you guys have just in terms of the athlete side of this? We're so focused here on the coaching side, and apparently we do this for the athletes. That is the primary reason why we're all here, not just from a coach development space, but a coaching space. How do you think the trickle down of the reaction to all this? You know, we're all hopefully midway through this, and there is an end in sight. But what's your sense on the athlete side of things with all of this?
Oh, it's been very challenging where, athletes who are used to being either together or having a coach right there, they've had to do things again virtually, do workouts alone, really pull from someplace within themselves to go, okay, I'm going to do this. And I think, for tennis, because we had the US Open, you had a number of events where they were trying to bring players together, give them an opportunity to play. You saw how that played out, where, some unusual results here and there, because people were more than ready to play. Some people weren't ready to play. So it was you kind of saw that in action, and listening to our player development coaches on what they're doing and how they're preparing. And they're talking now about how do we prepare athletes for the Australian Open, and the things they had to do, where they decided not to send any coaches to France for the French Open, but were up late at night, all throughout the night, watching matches, doing the analytics, doing everything they could to support the players wherever they were.
Wow, there's a bunch there to unpack. I think there's one thing that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Michelle de Heiden from Australian Gymnastics, in terms of their preparation for the Olympics and keeping athletes motivated. So I'd love to go to that first, and then we can go to the idea of remote coaching, because I think that's another conversation of what are we going to keep that we weren't doing prior to March, that we've figured out now, and that will change the direction of coaching specifically. But tell us just a little bit more about that idea of the motivation piece, and particularly for some of the younger athletes that perhaps don't have the context that some of our older athletes have, and really staying connected to the reasons why we do what we do.
Right. And full disclosure here, I'm not on the court with the athletes. From what I hear from the experiences of our player development folks, it's been, it's a constant contact, keeping that relationship open, making sure that they're doors open, that the athlete can come to them, but keeping that contact with them, preparing, training with them, for them, checking in on them, having certain markers that they follow, type of thing. And then when you can, to be able to have some face-to-face time with the athlete on court.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the trend of it's human first, athlete second. Oh yeah, we're participating in the sport, a way distant third now, and I think that's definitely the message across the globe right now of how the coach, as we knew beforehand, was a pivotal role in so much of community development, but particularly from the sporting lens, that capacity that we all have to really influence people's lives has perhaps become even more important. How about just from the question we talk a lot about is the creativity and innovation side of it. What are you hearing out around the courts in terms of what are people doing that are different, out of the thinking outside the box to really rethink the constraints that are being put on us now?
I think there's the ability to use things like Zoom, to use the video capabilities and the analytics, where there are, here's what I want you to have filmed, send it, and we'll talk about it. Those types of things, for younger children and kids, it's as simple as new ways to pick up tennis balls, because we don't want you, for a long time, don't touch it with your hands. So new ways to do it, make it a game, make it more fun, less feeding of the balls and fewer tennis balls being used, so they're actually playing more. Those types of things I think we've seen a lot about. But just the creativity about how do I stay connected with the athletes, whether they're world class, whether they're just starting the sport, or in your Parks and Rec junior program. How do I stay connected and be of service to the player and their family as part of a team to keep a child focused and sane during this period of time? It's hard, and you just gotta realize where they're coming from.
And then you mentioned the analytics and folks staying up to all hours of night watching games and literally doing this from the other side of the pond. How is that? How does that even work? I can't even wrap my head around it.
Now, I know I sound really smart because I say analytics, and I know nothing about it. But I do know, for example, when Sonia Kenning played in the finals, the woman that she was playing, they had the team had gotten all her matches, previous matches, and were doing the analytics and sending the information to Sonia and her coaches so that she could prepare for those matches. So I think it's things like that, not only the analytics, but the work that our mental coaches do for the players, watching the matches, having an opportunity to discuss matches with them, those types of things.
And that is a huge piece, and I'd love to go a little deeper on the mental side, because that is probably the biggest takeaway, or the biggest learning, or the biggest emphasis, not only coming into COVID, but certainly on a day-to-day basis, of how do we shape the mental health, the mental wellness of our athletes, and how do we do that remotely? So can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of, the role of that particular, I don't want to call it a job, but that aspect of performance support for the individual athlete, because I think that's a huge piece.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate at USTA, where we have two mental skills coaches on staff who work with the players, and they watch matches. They know what they've had face to face. They have a relationship with those players anyway, and then they're available. It's not something, hey, that match, what's going on there? But it's something, if the player wants to talk about it, they're there to talk about it. You read more and more about players being very open about their mental skills coach and how that's helped. So I think that's a real positive, that there isn't the stigma involved, that if you've got a mental skills coach, it's just another part of your team. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to have that available to you, and one of the things, what better time to really test those mental skills than during a period of time like this?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly is an opportunity, but I think the counter that we did an ICC webinar, I don't know, back in the summer, on care in coaching, and one of the for me, one of the biggest takeaways was this idea of tough love. Like, how did we get to this point? How, in your perspective in tennis, how did we get to this point that there's this team of people around this one athlete, that it's not just, hey, go out there, do your best. If you win, you did better than the other person. You were just, you had a good day. What's your perspective on that? Of how did we get to this point of this team around our athletes?
Well, I think it's called money. That is what kind of started it. That the better players were able to hire people, that maybe they've found that it helped them when they were in doing their training, and let's bring them along. And you see a lot more of that. I know for us, because we have two people on staff, that the mental skills is part of the camps for kids from 8 to 18. So they get a little bit of a taste of it. And it's, it's the journaling, it's the self-reflection, it's those types of things, so that those who can't have someone with them all the time, that they are able to kind of self-check on different things and have those. But I think it's professional wise, it needs to be part of the team. Kind of sad to see as it gets down, the junior players who have that. Not sure whether that's necessary, but I think you see it at the college level as well, that the sports psychologist, the mental skills coach, helping athletes across the board.
Yeah, that's the big question right now, isn't it? Whether it's sports specialization, when do we start to really get into the competitive piece? And we've talked about it in the on past calls here with what's happening in places like New Zealand or Norway, Finland, where there is more of a focus on that early development of the love of sport, not the sport, not a sport, but participation, physical activity. And I think, the world of tennis is probably one of the best examples of, you see some of the best started from the very beginning, and it's hard to argue with what works, right? So how do you see that evolving? How do you see, that idea of, when is it too early for a young athlete to have that team of support around them? Call it a parent, or this team of specialists. What's your thought?
You shouldn't have got me started on this, because I've got really strong feelings on that, and it's a shift that I'm not really sure how that happens. My experience has primarily been in the community area, where we're trying to get kids in tennis, and to see that click where the parent or the adult in their life's like, oh, this child might be pretty good. And then it's like, boom, let's go. And I've talked to so many parents over the years who are, how do I get off this train? This is not good for the child. It's not good for our family. We have no life. But they feel that they have to do it. And that's the sad thing for me, because if someone decides, oh, I'm going to take a season off, the reality is, yeah, they're going to be behind those who have just gone about it. I think for us, we're really trying to encourage that multi-sport participation. While there are many tennis players who have specialized in an early age, there are also many tennis players who have a sports background and have developed a little bit later. So it's, for us, it's changing that mentality. When you tell a tennis coach, hey, you need to allow them to do this and to play that sport, and they're like, oh no, you're affecting my livelihood, and for them to realize this is just part of it, and to encourage multi-sport camps, those types of things. So I think with our athletic development and our ADM model, that we're really trying to make that more than just, here's your warm-up type of thing, that it's part of everything that we do. And it's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, that balance between athlete wellness and athlete performance, I think, that is the current dilemma. That's the paradox here that I think we're all trying to navigate, and you guys are at the forefront of it all, I think, because there's just so much visibility with these young superstars that sort of get put under the spotlight, and there are so many examples that they're successful early, and they stick around for what feels like a lot longer. They feel like some of these players have been around forever, and I'm curious, in your perspective, you mentioned ADM, you talk about long-term athlete development. How is that positioned right now moving forward? Do you see that this idea of of moving away from sport specialization at the earlier ages is actually going to help performance in the long run?
I believe that it will, and through player development, they've been driving the LTAD conversation since 2006. They released the progressive development of high performance player poster, and it was then adopted into community tennis where I was, and now USTAU. So through taking that, it's evolved into the ADM model that we're using, and we're trying to incorporate it in all levels of what we do, what we present, the curriculum that we develop. But you've got to educate the coaches about it and how it looks and what it looks like and how it's going to help their athletes develop into better for any sport if they can do other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you guys managing in the coach education space, the coach development, with regard to managing parents? How is that conversation? Is that something that you embed? Is that something that people have to figure out? Is it, if you're in a good system, that sorts itself out? How do you guys manage that from a national perspective?
I think at the national level, anyone who comes in contact with our player development group, if they come to camps, there's always training for the parents. They, I wouldn't say separate, but they want the player to be able to take care of themselves. You see, the parent carrying the tennis bag and getting the water. It's like, no, you need to, for the player, it's a combination. Educating the parent as well as educating the player that this is part of you becoming a better person, a better player, as you take care of things. You take care of your water, you take care of your bag, you get your towel, you do those types of things. And but again, it's very hard. Not just in tennis. You go to youth soccer, football games, and it's like, the parents on the sideline, it's not doing anybody any good. But there's that, whether it's the US Open dream or just the college scholarship dream, it's a driving force on that. And again, there just has to be more education surrounding that. And I think we're trying to do some of that within our competition, that at the lower levels, make it more where you play and you play again. It's not the single elimination. It's not for rankings until a certain age, those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I know across the NGB landscape, we've had many conversations about the parent management, parent education, how that fits in with our discussions with coaches. How about the broader, the more specific conversation of safe sport and just that certification path, that it seems like it's inevitable that in every direction we're asking coaches to do more and more. How do you see that evolving in tennis?
Well, I think I'm very proud of the USTA, is that they took a stand a couple of years ago, and anyone who wanted to be a part of what we call Net Generation, which is our youth tennis brand, to receive any of the materials, to do any of the coaching, you had to go through the Safe Sport, and we paid for it. So I'm very proud that they did that. We will now in 2021, it'll be mandated that anyone who is going after coaching certification has to be Safe Sport approved. And what we all know is that's not going to solve the problem. But again, the 45-minute to an hour course that they have to take, that's the value, that you just become aware of what to look for and what to do. So I think it's absolutely necessary. And it's, like a CPR and safety, those types of things, which we have not, it hasn't across the board been been required. So I think we're really trying to up the standards of those who say they're certified.
Yeah. And I want to push you a little further on the quality coaching connection there, because I think that's the broader conversation that we're all having in terms of, well, if we increase certification, what does that actually do to quality coaching? I think there's definitely some of our British friends are very articulate in saying you can't learn to coach in a classroom, and you certainly doesn't matter if there's a certificate up on the wall. How are you guys managing that conversation of A, what is quality coaching, and B, how does that frame itself in this conversation of certification?
Well, the certification process, we're working with the two organizations, been totally revamped. And in 2021, an entirely new pathway with new education requirements, because tennis coaches in the US did not have to do nearly as much as, say, in Canada or in Europe to become certified. You could do it in a weekend. You could do it. It was pretty easy. And the requirement to do continuing education wasn't there. So, we're going to have 4 levels of coaching, as well as schools and community for non-certified coaches. So training there. Big emphasis on vocational tracks. We've got affiliation with some universities where they have a professional tennis management school going that way. There'll be electives, there'll be the in-person courses that they'll have to do, and they'll have to continue to maintain that. So this is a huge change for tennis that we're really pushing to up both the quality and the amount of education that someone has to have before they can say, I'm a certified professional. It's not going to stop the person who hangs up a shingle and says, oh, I can teach tennis. But it's also for us is educating the public that just like anything else, you're not going to go get your hair cut from someone who doesn't have some type of education in that area. You shouldn't go learn tennis from someone who's not certified. Yeah.
And that's that if we can capture it in a soundbite, that's the reason why I think what you guys are doing is so critical and really leading the US in that respect, in terms of it's not just the compliance piece. I think you guys are talking about a systems change. It's really about the culture of, and call it top down, or I'd love to hear where you think the driver is, but that culture shift of, we want you to be a better coach, and we're going to give you we're going to set up a system to essentially make that happen.
It's a challenge because people, they don't want to, or some people are bristling at the fact you're going to make me do more. And for a lot of tennis coaches, if I go away to a 3-day workshop, that's 3 days of revenue that I'm missing. But the idea that you need to do that to keep your skills up, and we're placing a big emphasis on much more on the how to coach. The what to coach is extremely important, and you can get that, but the how to coach that's critically important as well. And so we want to focus on that, focus on coaching behaviors and the environment that coaches set. So it's big.
What's driving that? Why is this so important?
Because I think there was a general consensus that as an industry, we were lacking in what was required in the certification, and that's not to disparage all those out there. There's some fabulous people out there who are lifelong learners, and they are head of the class, but to have that base. And I think for us, it is definitely going to improve the quality of those who are out there coaching now. But I think it's also going to give a sense for the future if someone say, wow, I could make a living coaching tennis, and that's what I want to do, and here's how you do it. I think that's extremely important for us, that we're really looking towards the future and what can we build as far as a tennis workforce.
Yeah, look, it connects so nicely with what Ken Martell was talking about and what they've done with hockey, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the connection between the athlete development conversation you're having and this real investment in systems for quality coaching. So how is that conversation? Is it happening together? Is it happening separately? How is that dialogue unfolding as you revamp the coaching piece?
We're trying to do it together. Interesting. When I've known Ken for a long time, and back when tennis introduced modified equipment, modified courts, we were like the leaders in moving forward with this, and we worked with hockey with what they were doing. They came to us on, well, how do you do this and how do you navigate that? And they just went boom. They just went they so far surpassed us so quickly with their commitment to it, and we had some challenges along the way, and we had a lot of resistance to, what do you mean they're going to play on a small court with little rackets? I learned on the full-size court with a yellow ball. My child should be able to do that. So we're getting back to what's important, and that's having, as I mentioned, the player development had long-term athletic development for a while, and we incorporated it in what we were doing. But now with ADM, it takes it to a new level. And now hockey and a lot of the other sports, they're the inspiration for us.
Yeah, you got to be careful around those hockey guys. If you have a good idea, run, and everybody, and you they say, hey, thanks for that idea, Cam. You're like, that was my idea. They're
my. I'm not going to say it was our idea. I don't want to get in trouble with them, but man, they took it and they were committed to it and didn't look back. So to me, they're kind of the gold standard at how that can and should be done.
Well, you guys have this little tennis facility in Orlando that I didn't think I could count to 100 until I went to the facility and toured around 100 tennis courts. Tell us a little bit about that extension. Is that an extension of Disneyland, or how did that?
Yeah, it's tennis Disneyland. Yeah. We had our player development folks who were in Boca Raton at first they were at Key Biscayne. Then they moved to Boca and were at someone else's tennis club. And as they got bigger and better, and as that other facility got bigger and needed more courts, it's like, wow, we really need a place for our athletes to train. So a group started talking, got an offer they couldn't refuse from Orlando with where they had, and the dream was to build this world-class facility that would help not only player development, but could become a laboratory for so many other things. And I think, again, talking about the future and the coaching, that will be where we're able to do a lot of our mentorship, to bring coaches in, and it's just a learning laboratory right there. So it's a very cool place. And when they've got events going and all 100 courts are active, the place is rocking. Yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up is because of the innovation with the court sizes and just what you've been able to do. I think that for every single sport, for all of us to be able to rethink, okay, how do we make our sport just more fun, more accessible? How do we reduce the barriers? Because I think that if we can talk a little bit about the diversity, equity, inclusion part of where we're heading, and maybe that one of the best things that's come out of this pandemic is that we've really been forced to look at our sports and say, are we actually doing what we're saying? And I think for most of us, it's an embarrassment. I'll be straight up with it. And so I think what you guys have done down there it's in a unique location, but it provides you that opportunity to really open things up. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, just in terms of the broader removing barriers to the sport, and what some of the things you guys are at least talking about, if not doing, in the D&I space?
We've got a lot of work to do, and we recently had management changes, had a new CEO, and he's fully committed to making this critically important to what we do. And I think you can see player development, and Martin Blackman has always been committed to that, with the diversity, the number of female coaches that they have. But it's a big part of what USTA does, especially at the community end, where we have our foundation does so much stuff out in the community, and the resources that are available. We are a very fortunate national governing body, because we have this little thing called the US Open. Hasn't helped that much this year. We had some, like everybody else, some took a serious financial hit, but we've been very lucky to be able to help communities, provide grants, provide coaching. But it's going to be a huge focus for the USTA. And if anybody watched the US Open, you saw the commitment of the organization with the seat coverings and different groups that they did, and the advertising campaign. So I truly believe that it's not just something they're doing because somebody said they should do it. They are very committed to making sure that we walk the talk.
Yeah, I think it's such an important part of the conversation,
and we've got to do a better job of it, especially on the coaching end. Making sure that we look like America, so that children coming up can see someone that looks like them coaching and be inspired by that as well. And I think that's the biggest part of it's more than just a discussion now. It's what are we actually doing? I think it's gone beyond, okay, let's have another meeting or create a, I think every NGB has now posted a diversity, equity, inclusion committee of some description, some shape or form. And it's now, okay, how do we, it's not just in coaching. I think let's take it a step further. What are you guys doing from a coach education space in terms of that conversation, having that embedded in your curriculum, in activities in that respect? Because I know that there's a bunch of us that are doing that. How does that look for you guys in terms of actually, actions with your coach prep? I think from the coaching standpoint, it's going to be a recruiting effort to get a more diverse workforce, to go where people are, instead of saying, oh yeah, we've got a coaching workshop, come visit us. No, that's not going to work. We've got to actively recruit and actively go after those coaches, and make sure that through our coach developers on down, again, that we are representative of what's going on within the United States. And it's from the community end, as we've added curriculum, character development is a big part of it. And one of the things we realized in all the discussions that were going on, we did a great job with character, listening, responsibility, all these things, and there wasn't anything about diversity. So we've added the word from the beginning level, we've added inclusive in there, and just incorporating that into the lessons, and what does that mean, and how do we show it? And so I think it's little things like that'll we've got a long way to go, that we need to do more of that, making sure that we've got modules that deal with that and make people aware.
Yeah, it's a rosy picture in some respects, and I want to sort of go beyond the doom and gloom and think, okay, the walls have come down, or the walls have gone up. I don't know which way we're looking at it, but we're back to a new normal, because I don't think we're going to get back to the old normal. But what's one thing you think you've seen that we will continue to do in tennis that we weren't doing before we went into this?
I think we will continue some form of virtual education. The modules and the LMS, all those, but an actual virtual workshop that we can do. I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. I think creativity. I think one of the upsides has been you're forced to be more creative with things. You can't do things the way it used to be done. It's not going to work. So what are you going to do to make sure that you stay forward with everything? And I think, the number of, you've done 30 webinars. I've probably done the same number for our Tennis Industry United, and I know the number of webinars that I've taken and the education I've gotten. I think those are the kind of things that I hope, I don't know whether this will happen, but that people realize the value and will take time for those types of things.
Yeah, and again, I give you guys so much credit for that in terms of the pivot being a very strategic and very, it seems like from the outside, a very well thought out response to this whole thing, because I think you guys could have easily said, hey, we've got to get this thing up and running immediately, and I think there's a bunch of us that tried that, and it was hard work. It was sort of like go out in the rain, and you needed a raincoat, but there just wasn't time for an umbrella or shoes. We just went out there, and that analogy of we're all in the same storm, just in different, okay, I'm a rowing coach, different boats. That idea that we're all sort of looking over right now, and I'd go a step further. A lot of people I've heard say it's the communities of practice. It's let's use this opportunity to connect, because when's the next time we're actually going to be able to get face to face? And even when we do get face to face, this prep time can make that so much more meaningful, and so. I think that's another great part of what I think you guys have done, is really think about the strategic aspect to this. That's hard. It's hard to do. It takes more time, but in the long run, it's really, really well thought out. So,
well, that's nice to hear, because I think sometimes we feel we get stuck in the weeds, and are we really doing this the right way? So that's nice to hear. But again, we've had some great mentorship along the way, and great, as you said, the communities of coaching, a lot of sharing and being able to say, what's been your experience? Here's what we're gonna do. We've picked the brain of Miss Sarah McQuade many times, Sarah and Linda, on what the heck are we doing? And so it's a process.
And then in terms of, just forecasting a little further beyond, when we get back to normal, but in terms of the bigger picture here, we're lucky enough to be a part of a global conversation here of where is coach development going, and looking at some of the frameworks and the standards. What's the one piece that you think, and you've mentioned the care aspect, but what's the one piece that you think is the thread that will continue us through and really, survive whatever's next? Because, the doom and gloomers say that this is not the first time we're going to be hit with one of these pandemic things. So how do we continue to thrive through what I think 8 months ago, we never thought we were going to hit this kind of thing?
I think it's a realization that the importance of self-care as we go through this, that the realization that, hey, this is a stressful time, and maybe that's why I'm feeling stressed, but taking time for those types of things. And I think for us, this emphasis on how to coach while still doing homage and making sure the what to coach is very important, but that how to coach, I think, is going to be extremely helpful as we move forward.
Yeah. No doubt about that. I think, the conversations of athlete wellness are probably as paralleled with coach wellness, coach burnout.
Absolutely. Yeah.
without that coach at the center of any community, it's you could have the best athletes in the world, but without that centerpiece, it's pretty hard to do any of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, very good. Questions from the peanut gallery. Love to hear. We've got a couple of minutes left. Anna, lots of great things at weightlifting. What any nuggets here? Anything you want to beg, borrow, and steal from what the folks at tennis are doing?
I really love what tennis is doing, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job trying to basically bite off a really, really, really big, change, and that's going to be really tough. So I'd say hats off for going down that road, because I think it'll be positive in the end, even though right now it's probably very daunting to be in the middle of it. I'd be curious to hear more about how your coach developer sort of instructor group or facilitator group, like how have they received some of these challenges? Because you've put a lot of different change to them. How has that experience been in managing that?
It's been, they continue to impress me because we were kind of piloting our first phase of our workshops and getting them on board, getting them ready that they could go out and deliver them on their own. And then it was like, put the brakes on. So we've had to practice some of that, communication, staying in contact with them, having different people come and speak to them. When we decided to do these virtual workshops, it was just, I didn't know who was going to raise their hand. And we had, 3/4 of the people raised their hand and said, yeah, I'll give it a try. I want to do it. I was blown away by that. So they're, I think because of the fact that we were a bit selective and we felt that we had a good group, I'm very excited about where we're headed as far as when we actually get back out and handing it off to them.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question, Anna, just in terms of attrition of some people have just, I know in other sports has gone, look, I love doing it face to face, but I'm just not an online person. And that adaptability and that you speak to, I think is, it's a credit, I think, not only to the selection of those, but also there's a structure that you've been able to put together. And you mentioned the one and only Sarah McQuade, and this is your you're on the clock, Sarah, for whatever thoughts you have on that, because you've been a part of the fabric there, whether you like it or not, from inside.
Each part, yeah.
So your thoughts on all that, Sarah?
No, golly, my hat's off to all of you, because I have watched all three of you over the last 6 or 7 months pivot from one space to another without taking breath, and done an unbelievably good job with tennis to one side, little or no resources to shore up your efforts. So just hats off in terms of what you've been able to do. And at this point, I hear Brené Brown, who, talks about leaning into the discomfort, because it's from the discomfort that real creativity is born. And I think if we think about the creativity piece, the connection back to the coach developers is quite critical, because we've spent an awful lot of time supporting this army of coach developers to do an unbelievably good job with the in-person pieces. And then all of a sudden, they're operating in a completely different space. Now, Cam, you might know better than I, but I'm not sure what research is out there that guides us to identifying what is best practice in this new next. And I think anecdotally, we've all been we've been working from an anecdotal point of reference in terms of what do we think is the very best way to support learning and development in a virtual environment. And nobody has the answer as to what really works. It's actually putting ourselves into the shoes of the end user to say, well, holy hell, what do they need? Yeah. And I know we've had several conversations about, well, what's the skill set? How do we help them cultivate the skill set? And our biggest challenge for everybody is, how do we do this without compromising the integrity and the quality of the training?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to know a lot more in a couple of weeks. And my guess we'll do another shift. And I can tell you that the first virtual training that we had, it was deer in headlights by the folks. And the decision on my part that it's the what we have is very aggressive with interactions. And my thinking was, oh, I can train somebody, do the breakouts, to do this, do that. After that first training, it's like, nope, cannot. I'm doing it because you need some time to bring somebody along to do the host producer part. And to me, if you're going to do that workshop that is more than just somebody dumping information on you, it's a huge part. So we'll see.
And I think that's the big one on the research side, Sarah, to your question of we fall into the trap of doing too much, and we've had this conversation in a bunch of different contexts, that is value how much we provide, or is the value how much they take away? And, we know the answer to that question. How do you navigate that in a way that it's not all interaction, but also the value of, I think those TED Talks go pretty well. There's no interaction in some of those TED Talks. I know there's a lot of very wealthy people in Hollywood that tell amazing stories. There's no backwards and forwards. They tell a story, whether we like it or not. We're either engaged and we pay the money or not. So I think there's this very interesting approach to how we engage our audience, but also what do they do with it? And I think that we're in uncharted territory.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point, because I've seen so many different organizations as they pivoted towards this sort of virtual learning approaches. Different organizations have adopted different approaches to sharing that need to know content. Some have gone down the line of the recorded presentations, and they put that front and center as a pre-reflection. And then there's been some sort of webinar to enable the conversations to happen around what we've learned, how we might apply it. But I think the piece that's still really important is then what? So once you get to the end of these virtual learning pieces, and even if this is some sort of virtual certification, and Anna might be able to speak to this better, she's further ahead than we are, but what then happens is you put the line in the sand, they produce the evidence that are required, we've done the virtual evaluation. How do we know it's working in the field? What's the ongoing support?
The $1 million question, Sarah. As always.
I don't have any answers.
That will be your next webinar. Be careful. You know how. Well, I'm respectful of everyone's time. We're close to the top of the hour. And thank you so much. Absolutely big applause.
Okay, both of you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Cam. This is fun.
Always fun to chat, and we will continue these conversations informally and whatever we end up doing next. So and thank you again. I really appreciate everyone joining us for the webinar today, and we'll catch you all next time.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Well done.